I'd like to talk a little bit about my decision on the Efoy battery charging system and my choice to get the Bluetooth adapter, which will give us a display of my current status. This is a screen that talks a little bit about the battery, at the voltage at the battery, the total operating hours to date. Granted, I just installed it. My battery type, which is an AGM. And over the last 2 days, my average charge time takes 5.8 hours to take it from 12.3 volts back up to 14. So it's a pretty good recovery time, averaging about 6 hours. And I've used about 30% of my fuel over, I don't know, 4 days, and I think total time it's ran is 96 hours, I think I saw somewhere. 52 hours of total operating time so far. And to make my decision on the Efoy, the first thing I did was I got the Victron Bluetooth smart battery monitor, and I installed that. That gave me the ability to individualize my loads and find out my loads for each and every 12 volt breaker and what it takes to operate that. So what I then did is I logged all of that, like my cabin lights, just to turn the breaker on draws 0.02 amps. If I hit the switch for the 2 fluorescent lights, I draw a little over 3 amps. And then the third fluorescent light, that's over the kitchen sink, 1.28 amps. So I draw 4.5 amps if I'm running my fluorescent lights. The LEDs only draw 0.06 amps each. And I just went down. I turned that breaker off and then turned on my entertainment breaker, which is my inverter. That brings on the TV and some charging ports. And that you can see it fluctuates from 6 amps up to about 8 amps, depending on if a phone is charging, maybe I'm charging a battery for my drill, TV comes on or off, subwoofer, that kind of stuff. And then we go down to some intermittent loads. Water pump, a little over 4 amps, sump pump, the head on a flush. Refrigerator and freezer are 2 loads that are kicking in and out all day long. Fridge is 5.7 amps, freezer's 5.313. Anchor light, running light. So anyways, did it all. Autopilot. Just to turn autopilot on and hold a steady rudder is 1.3 amps. If the rudder has to adjust, I can draw up to 5 amps. So that's a fluctuating load. GPS draws just about 3 amps. So that took me to a secondary chart that when I'm sailing, I'm using this series of amps in order to sail with no motor. So I'm basically fluctuating from 11 amps up to about 18 amps. And that'll happen until my Efoy sees 12.2 volts, at which point it'll kick on and feed 6 amps back into the batteries. So now my batteries see a draw of 5 amps to 22 amps fluctuating. And when I go on anchor at night, I turn on the anchor light, it draws 0.32 amps. If I'm charging a phone or something like that, I'm drawing anywhere from 1 to 2 amps. The fridge and freezer are going to kick in and be 0 amps, 5 amps per fridge or freezer, so up to 10 amps coming in and out. And then the Efoy is running at 6 amps all night long over 7 to 10 hours, recharging my battery. And the data currently on the Efoy shows that it takes about 5.8 hours to recover. So I'm back in the positive by morning. So my boat is the Hunter 38, and so I picked this location to install the Efoy. So that vent right there is the exhaust from the system. And then if I take these 2 cushions off, this is where I installed the Efoy charging system. The subwoofer used to be here. I spun him over there, extended my subwoofer cabling, adjusted some woodwork, and fit that in there. So the Efoy unit sits right in here. This is my 10 liters of fuel. This is my data cable that comes up here to a display unit, which is right there. This is my drain hose that currently travels underneath and drops down into my keel bolts and down into the bilge. And I'm probably going to take this bottle when it's empty and mount it and let the little bit of condensate that comes off this drain into there. That'll be distilled water. Then the wire harness is simply 4 wires, 2 browns that go to my shunt side of my Victron battery monitor to monitor the load. And then the positive one's a signal wire and the other's the charging wire. 4 wire hookup. So I just killed my AC charging system, and now I'm just on the batteries, and I turned on a heavy load. So I'm currently drawing 27 amps off the battery and 13 volts, and it's dropping quick. So when that gets to 12.2, 12.3, that's when the Efoy system will kick on. Okay, so that was a pretty quick drawdown. The Efoy now sees 12.3 volts. And it's going to see that for a 60 seconds. And then it's going to switch because it's on automatic mode. So that should kick on shortly. Okay, so 60 seconds passed and the Efoy has gone into start phase. So it's coming online. And as it comes online, it'll start to show some charging current once it gets warmed up and running. If you want to know how loud this is, so that's it. It's about 22 decibels. You have to be dead quiet to hear it. And then here, this will start to, a fan will kick on and it'll blow out about 70 to 80 degree warm air out of this vent at a very little velocity. Okay, she's starting to ramp up. We're currently charging at 2 amps. And climbing. And I can verify that with my Victron, that it sees just about 2 amps charging back into the batteries right now, or basically 25 watts. And that should max out at 6 amps and 75 watts. So we'll give it some time to run and we'll check back in. So I thought while we were waiting for the Efoy to come to full power, I'd show you all I have is an AGM 210 amp hour battery. And then my start battery. So this is the Victron shunt trip. Here are the fuses for the Efoy. All marine grade fuses and fusing. So on average, I did a bunch of research. The boat used about 96 amp hours a day on average when sailing and at anchor and not plugged into shore power. So that's why I selected the 140 amp hour Efoy. That should give me back my 96 hours plus a little extra, basically for winter when you got to run the furnace and a few additional loads that'll bring me above 96 amp hours. 96 amp hours is my summer amp hours, and my winter amp hours would be a little bit higher due to running the furnace. And that furnace draw, as you saw, was about 7 amps as it's running. And then also knowing that if I've got a 210 amp hour battery, AGM, I can discharge it down to, say, 45%. So that gives me, again, the math backwards again, puts me at 130 available amp hours of battery. I'm only using about 96, and an Efoy recharging up to 140. So that was my choice to not buy more batteries, put in solar, just install this little methanol fuel cell. Took about 4 to 6 hours, and we should be able to now go sailing, stay at anchor, and not have to worry about how are we going to charge our batteries back up with a noisy generator or running the motor or what have you. So if you're not familiar with the Victron, what's really nice about it is it's telling me at this current discharge rate I have 10 days that I could be at anchor when I'm drawing 1 amp off the batteries. If I go over here, and I think I can introduce my refrigerator load. So it'll kick on. There's that 5 amps to run the fridge. And now it starts calculating, saying, well, the fridge is running at this current amp draw. You just shortened your time at anchor down to 3 days, 2 days. And the Efoy is currently, go back and look at it, it's currently putting almost 3 amps back into the battery. So I got a 3 amp offset. And I'm good for, a day and 12 hours. So it all depends on how many amps you're drawing on the battery. That equates to how long the battery is going to last at that draw. And I know that the fridge and the freezer are loads that come in and out. So that's a fluctuating number. If the fridge or freezer satisfy, I'm back up to 10 days, or at some times, if I take my amp draw down to nothing by turning off breakers, boom. The Efoy cycles on and off as it runs. Now I'm infinite. I can stay at anchor in an infinite amount of time. I'm up to 4 amps back on the positive side coming from the Efoy. And if the fridge and freezer are off, I just got a couple of lights on. Maybe my anchor lights on. So I'm in between a fridge and a freezer cycle, and I'm putting 4 amps back into the battery. Infinite amount of time on my batteries, knowing that the fridge and freezer are going to kick in and out at different times. And as they kick in, then obviously my amp draw goes from a positive to a negative, and my time remaining starts to calculate. So that's constantly fluctuating and moving about. Alright, so the system's been running about 20 minutes, and we're up to 13.6 volts. It is going to start switching off at 14.2 volts. We're currently putting 5 amps back into the battery, and we can come over to my Victron monitor and we can confirm that it sees 5 amps as well. And it's currently in full charging mode. And I think I'm pretty happy with this. Between this and running the motor in the morning while I'm making coffee to get hot water. So we'll run the engine for, say, an hour, hour and a half. Alternator is going to put out anywhere from 30 to 50 amps into the battery as needed. So it'll basically top off my batteries. And I get hot water. And we're ready for the next day. So I think I've not had to install a full solar array across the top of the boat. And as you know, solar's just an employee that's willing to work during the day. He does not pull a night shift. The Efoy, he pulls night shift. Gives me 6 amps during the day to counter off what I'm using. And then as long as I've done the math right, if I can get the boat below 6 amps at night, then I'm 5 amps, 4 amps in the positive for 7 to 10 hours, bringing the batteries back to 100%. If you can't get your batteries or your draw below 5 amps, then you need to go to the Efoy 210, which gives you 7 amps, 7 or 8 amps of charging. Yeah, the Efoy 210 would be 210 amp hours and a recharge rate of 8 amps. So if you can get your boat at night to draw below 8 amps, then the 210 is your ticket. And also to kind of show, so we're up to 14.1 volts. The Efoy knows that, so it's not going to go to a full charging current. So it's going to kind of float in here at and start dropping off so that it doesn't overshoot the battery. So it's got all that technology built in. So we're at 14.1. Once we hit 14.2, we're going to go into switching off mode. And the system will start to throttle off. I'll try to simulate the noise again. I'll try and be dead quiet. So that's the noise, like it's basically described. Kind of a cat purring in the background. You step away from the boat. I mean, I'm over in the galley now, and you're not going to hear it. I mean, shoot, the wind's blowing outside, the boat's rocking. I think that's going to work pretty good. Now I can sit down and then enjoy a good drink. Got my BSB brown sugar bourbons, top 103, high altitude. not have to worry about my batteries. So I think we are at 14.2 on the voltage now, and the charging current's tailing way off because we're almost where we need to be. We're still in charging mode. I think once it sees 14.2 for like continuous 60 seconds, it'll start switching off. And there you go. It's up to 14.4. System's gone back into standby, and it's going to sit there and just monitor until it sees 12.2 again, and then come back on. So I'm not sure how long that took. It's 1:30 now. I'm guessing maybe 45 minutes to an hour from when we started the heavy draw and the recharge. Alright, so I'm going to close this down. Figured I'd finish with a shot of our Hunter 38 that we enjoy. And, as you can see, no real room for a generator, so I've just got the Honda 2000 watt generator, and now the Efoy. So we're done. Thank you very much.